Hello, everyone. This is Harman Smith, and the cope regarding Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is in full swing because I don't think anybody was expecting this game to be such a huge hit. Everyone who's played it is over the moon about it. Everyone's glazing it. Everyone's hyping it up. I'm actually on the lower end of people praising it because I do think the game could have done a little bit more with its mechanics, but as a whole, this is a really fresh, original Yoshi game that really emphasizes the power of the Switch 2 and really showcases Goodfield's unique capabilities as a developer. Now, initially, there was this wave of criticism from people who had not played the game about how the game was not very good, how it was too easy, and how Goodfield has this really bad reputation. And all of that has like completely fallen by the wayside, and hopefully for good. I don't want to see people spurging out about Goodfield and like the games they make ever again because they're fantastic. But now the situation has developed. Okay. Now we're kind of seeing like the narrative kind of shift because Mysterious Book is so popular and so successful. It's very possible it might become the best selling Yoshi game ever. Okay. And as a result of that, a lot of articles have come forward from Polygon. A number of YouTubers have made videos about this. They have resorted to the age old cope of saying this game doesn't matter because it's never, ever going to be as good as Yoshi's Island. Now, if this sounds familiar, this is very similar to what happened when Super Mario Bros. Wonder came out, where everybody initially tried to say it was another new Super Mario Bros. Game. It was lazy, it was uninspired, it would never ever be as good as Super Mario Bros. 3. And one of the reasons I've been kind of ragging on Super Mario Bros. 3 fans recently is that I've realized just what a recurring issue this has been over the past several decades. You can find people spurging out about Super Mario World and trying to say it wasn't as good as Super Mario Bros. 3. You can see people like freaking about like 64, Galaxy, Sunshine, Odyssey, like the new Super Mario Bros. Games, like the Super Mario Land games, right? There is a certain subsection of fans who will always unilaterally come out and just dismiss every new game in any respective series due to it like allegedly not being as good as previous entries. And lately, when it comes to like Nintendo products, they seem to always be hyper fixating on like these universally beloved all-time classics. Games like Super Mario Bros. 3, games like Star Fox 64, games like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and like they don't really seem to have much perspective. Because I actually agree that Yoshi's Island is better than Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. I think I like the art style better. I like the mechanics better. I like the structure better. Like Yoshi's Island is my all-time favorite game, personally. So Mysterious Book was never ever going to eclipse that for me. But the problem I have with the argument is that I don't even really consider Mysterious Book to be in the same genre as Yoshi's Island, right? This is more of a 2D sandbox game, which is about like interacting with the environment as opposed to like Yoshi's Island being a 2D platformer, right? Like Mysterious Book is not really a 2D platformer. It's essentially a subgenre of the same genre of the 2D platformer. It's like its own thing. It's very notably distinct from Island. And as a result of that, like to me, comparisons between this and Island don't really make a whole lot of sense because they do indeed both have Yoshi in them. They are indeed 2D platformers. They are indeed 2D games. They do indeed have a lot of things in common, like superficially, but the core of the game is radically different. Like the focus is different, the challenge is different, the appeal is different. Like I don't understand this notion that people have that we have to endlessly compare other Nintendo IPs, Nintendo IPs to like previous entries in their series. Okay, like Yoshi is nothing like Island. It can be its own thing. It can have its own appeal. And like because it's so distinct, you can't call it a rehash, and so you can't just dismiss it and say that like Island is better. And I think this has been a massive blind spot for the Yoshi IP for a long time because for the past like 15 years or so, the narrative has always been that all of these Yoshi games are just rehashes of Island. Okay? New Island, Woolly World, Crafted World, like all of them were just kind of written off as just being lazy rehashes of the original Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Island DS wasn't mocked nearly as much, but that was before I think the pattern took hold and kind of the narrative began to establish itself. Like this idea that people were sick and tired of Island being rehashed and sick and tired of the same old tired childish Yoshi games. Like again, it's very very interesting to see like how the generally accepted narrative was that Woolly World, Crafted World, and like all these other Yoshi games were like badly received when in actuality they've been a pretty consistently um high performing like Nintendo 2D platformer. Yoshi's Island DS was a huge hit back in the day, right? It was super successful and it really kickstarted like Yoshi as a brand. And yet, like, we're still stuck in this weird narrative, this weird, strange mindset that like the IP is somehow stagnant and can't evolve. But like, oops, every time it tries to evolve, we have to dismiss it for not being enough like Yoshi's Island. Again, this is the typical behavior from these people. Either it's a rehash or it's something too different. And that's been what the community has been trying to put pin on Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. This idea that it's too different to be appealing, that it's too different to be as good as Yoshi's Island, instead of just acknowledging that this game is radically different and is well worth playing. And this is the problem with this narrative of like using old Nintendo properties to downplay new ones. Like, if you're intimately familiar with the old games, if you're a huge fan of it, like you've played the game already. So, like, the entire like mindset of like the old one is better should have no draw for you, right? If you're a fan of this IP, surely you want to like support it and surely you want to try the new game and see if it's as good or what they do with it. Like even if the game isn't as good as its predecessor, like in most cases it's well worth playing. And in fact, this seems to be the issue that I keep seeing is that these people keep throwing this idea that Yoshi's Island is the all-time classic that'll never be touched. Play that instead, it's way better, which is true. But if you're like me and have done that already, then like why wouldn't you buy the perfectly acceptable Yoshi and the Mysterious Book? Like even if you're a big fan of Yoshi's Island, you're still going to get a lot of value and mileage out of this game. Like the idea that like hardcore fans of Yoshi's Island wouldn't want to play this is just ludicrously stupid. It makes no sense. It's a boomer mentality, honestly. We've kind of moved past the whole like classic NES boomer mindset where like people glazed all the classic entries in these franchises and called them the very best to like kind of a mid 90s mindset where like a lot of these people are advocating for this idea that games like Yoshi's Island were like these super high quality releases that everyone loved on release when that's not really true. It is very easy to forget just how controversial and polarizing Yoshi's Island was when it first came out. Just like how Majora's Mask was kind of polarizing, just like how games like Super Mario Galaxy 2 were kind of polarizing. Like, it's kind of weird looking back on it now, considering how popular those games have become over the years. But the simple fact of the matter is, like, a lot of games in Nintendo's catalog that are considered all time classics now were initially rejected by the audience. These kinds of like knee jerk reactions to, say, Wind Waker's reveal, right? The infamous, like, Wind Waker is a cartoon backlash, like that did not stand the test of time. Like when Wind Waker actually came out and people actually played it, people found that in a lot of critical aspects, it was a lot better than Ocarina of Time. Now, you could argue Ocarina was a better game overall, and I would agree with you, but does that mean playing Wind Waker was a waste of time? Does that mean it was a bad game? Does that mean that like Nintendo completely wasted everyone's time? No, of course not. They took a risk, it paid off, and they made something really novel and unique, something that even today is kind of unmatched in how daring it was, especially at the time. uh Mysterious Book to me feels like one of those kinds of projects in which Goodfield decided to take a radically different look at the Yoshi franchise, make something completely new and interesting about it, and have really made something very unusual and compelling. Now, I'm not going into this game wishing for it to be better than Yoshi's Island. Okay, like I'm going into this hoping to have a good time with what it is, and that's kind of my mentality on this at this point. Like, why are we endlessly making these comparisons between two games that have nothing to do with each other outside of some superficial similarities? I remember playing Yoshi's Story for the first time growing up. I had rented it at Blockbuster and took it home, and I got like 4 levels in, and I was just kind of like, this isn't as good as Island. And I've always maintained that feeling. I've always maintained that opinion. I've always supported that take. I've always been like a big advocate, for talking about how Island is better than Story. But that doesn't mean Story isn't worth playing. That doesn't mean that people can't enjoy Story for what it is. And that doesn't mean people should just straight up like ignore Story for daring to not be exactly like Island. And this is like what the critics and like the YouTubers are advocating for essentially is that they don't want Yoshi to grow or evolve. They don't even want Yoshi at all. Like what they want to do is that they want to be comfortable in their nostalgia. They want to say Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island is one of the best games on Super Nintendo, and yet like they don't want Nintendo to do anything with the IP. They can't do a game like Yoshi's Island because they'll just be told that like the game is too similar and not as good as it, and they can't innovate and try something new because these same people were spurred out about how they prefer the Yoshi's Island formula. So in a lot of ways, you really do have to ignore the feedback to these individuals because they very much are indeed arguing in bad faith. And that really does need to be understood because we went into this release being told that this would be a minor release, that this was an embarrassing thing to announce on Mario's 40th anniversary. This was a waste of time. It was a stopgap release before the real Nintendo Direct would release the new games, would reveal the real games, right? This is something that like people wrote off like almost immediately, even after the trailers kind of demonstrated all of its unique mechanics. And that is a mindset that we really do need to get out of. Like this was a very strange, very unusual situation in which like the game kind of defied all expectations and became popular in spite of the backlash. And I do think it's a case of like so many of these grifters just kind of taking it for granted that Yoshi would never be taken seriously, that Yoshi would never be respected, and they were kind of taking off guard by it, which is why they're so busy spurging out about it right now. They really thought that this game would fail and they'd be able to make clickbait videos about it. And you can just tell that they're upset. Nintendo is like crying himself to sleep after this game got like an 81 on Metacritic and he couldn't continue with like the 7 out of 10 grift. Like we're seeing that happen more and more often where people want games like this to fail. They want it to fail and not be popular so they can make clickbait videos about it. And then they get like upset and frustrated when like the game does well and people are like hyped for the game. And like it's something that like they just weren't prepared for. Like I said, like they really had written this game off before it actually released, and now they're like suffering the consequences of that. Like this is another major Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive that was well received, very popular, and will continue to do numbers all throughout the year, and I think is going to go down as one of the year's best. And that's just another X on the check mark book, I suppose. That's another major release on Switch 2, and I think is going to kick off the uh, the domination of Nintendo Switch 2 this console generation. It's very possible now that like Switch 2 is going to outperform the PS6 and the Xbox X, and it's going to be crazy looking back on it and seeing how it was Yoshi, of all things, that kind of cemented that fact to the general public. I'm Harman Smith. This is my channel. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, buy my books, and I will see you all next time.